Hi everybody, I want to talk to you today about the Thousand Oaks shooting and the discovery of the Americas. So, what does the mass shooting in Thousand Oaks, California have to do with the exploration and colonization of the Americas 500 years ago? It's the unintended consequences of war and violence. The man who shot up the country music dance hall in Thousand Oaks, California, was formerly in the Marines. He was in the Marine Corps for about 5 years. He also served in Afghanistan between November 2010 and June 2011. Most of the men who explored and colonized the early Americas were also veterans of a major war. The war was called the Reconquista. The Reconquista was basically Christian Spaniards were reconquering Spain from the Muslims, the Moors, who had been controlling Spain for several hundred years before that. So the shooter in Thousand Oaks was trained to kill Muslims in Afghanistan. And the people who crewed Columbus's boat and conquered the Incans and the Mayans and the Aztecs, they were also trained to kill Muslims in Spain. Now, the key thing that connects these guys is not that they were trained to kill Muslims specifically, but that they were trained to kill. When you're trained to kill, when you're trained to be violent, sometimes it's hard to stop being violent once the war is over. Why did Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand finance Columbus's expedition? Why did they send these conquistadors out to conquer the Americas? They were risky bets to do this stuff. What if the ships had sank? That's a waste of money. Well, if you have a bunch of veterans of a war who have been violent and gone through some crazy ass shit, it's better to send them out to keep fighting somewhere else rather than letting them be violent in your own country. Violent people who know how to fight and kill are difficult to control. And we are seeing that now with veterans of the wars that we decided to fight overseas come home, and what do? This is very personal for me. Violence is really hard to stop once it starts. I was physically attacked and physically abused by someone. I was a victim of violence, and I started to become violent myself. So as much as I'm angry at this guy who shot up Thousand Oaks, California, I also sympathize just a little bit because that was his job, to kill. He was trained to kill, he was trained to be violent. And then he came home and he didn't have a job anymore. How do you put the genie back in the bottle with violence? It's really difficult to do, which is why we have to be more careful when we start these wars, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't. Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, before they were fighting us in Afghanistan now and fighting the US in the war on terror, they were trained by the CIA and they received funding from the US to fight the Russians in Afghanistan.
U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again.
So 9/11 happened as a consequence of a previous conflict, a previous war, right? It didn't come out of nowhere. And then in response, the US sends the Marines and the Army over to Afghanistan to start another war, right? And then the veteran of that war
Guys, run! Go! He's coming out this door!
is this guy who shot up this country music dance hall in Thousand Oaks, California. That's how violence continues. You send people to war, you accept violence, you say violence is the right thing to do at times. And then suddenly you can't stop it anymore. You start accepting violence, you start to say it's okay for someone to be violent, it's okay for me to be violent, or to tell someone else to be violent. And then where does it end? You can't accept violence, no matter what. You can't accept violence no matter what. You can't accept it in your life. You can't accept it when at the ballot box. You can't vote for it. You can't support it. Because once violence starts, it just doesn't stop, and you don't know what will happen. You don't know what will happen. You don't know where it will go. You don't know how bad it will get. You don't know where you'll end up once you let the violence start. Once you allow someone to be violent or you become violent yourself.